But Kanzi's up in Canada. I really want to get Kanzi on to even just an audio podcast because that dude has got a wealth of information. He's a native up there in Canada, does a lot of that what we call is I guess bushcraft and stuff down here. Just a wealth of knowledge. Really, really smart guy and really dialed in as far as preparedness goes. But it's people like that. It's people like White Rabbit. It's that have done this stuff and has grown. I've seen some of the things just in the last couple of years with her, the things she's done. So it's just kind of cool. We're watching this community grow. The real preppers, and it's not the. Granted, there are some people out there, and maybe if I had the means to do it, hell, I'd have a prepper community, a compound, a bunker, all that stuff. If I had the means to do that, it's not not in the cards, so to speak. And being a prepper, I didn't get into this for the money. I'm not going to become a millionaire being a YouTube prepper. So the odds of me getting a bunker, unless I dig it myself.
Yeah, I'm about to say, you better get in your backyard with a shovel like right now, because that's how you're going to get a bunker.
Yeah. It's going to be a root cellar, and I'll call it a bunker, just like I call my basement the bunker. One thing we were talking about in the group too, and how I talked about how preparedness has changed, and how when I first started out, there were things that we did, and then over time you learn, whether you're talking about different skills, you're talking about wasting things, lessons, you're learning lessons about things. We were talking about 5-gallon buckets in the group, about storing 5-gallon buckets. And I thought it was pretty interesting because the average person looking in to preparedness, you would think that as to be a good prepper, you have to have your basement filled with 50, 60 buckets of rice, beans, and all that stuff, right? And honestly, when I first started prepping, I was sort of in that mindset of, okay, I gotta it. And I'm not bagging on the whole 5-gallon bucket thing. But what I'm saying is, I was in that mindset in the beginning of, yeah, I'm just going to store everything in 5-gallon buckets. And then you figure out that you're not using as much. Say I've got a 5-gallon bucket of flour, right? I opened that 5-gallon bucket of flour. Now that the clock started ticking on that flour, and I've got to use that 5 gallons of flour within a year or so.
Yeah.
And that it just didn't work out that way. So I stopped. I sort of went away, I guess is my point, from a lot of the 5-gallon buckets, and more towards, especially now that I got a harvest right, more towards the freeze dried stuff, more towards the things that I'm going to use on a daily basis. Do you do, and a lot of people in the group, they had mentioned how, yes, they do some of the 5-gallon stuff, but nothing like you would think that from the outside looking in that preppers do. Do you do, how is your 5-gallon bucket stuff in your preparedness plans?
Well, it's people have a tendency to move away from the 5-gallon buckets, but that's actually a mistake. And it really has a lot to do with their plans. Okay. So here's why. We always tell people to diversify, but you should also diversify your preps. So the real reason for the 5-gallon buckets is because they're mobile. One of the things that I personally learned, because I have just recently switched over to totes. You go and buy yourself one of those 40-gallon black and white or black and yellow totes from Walmart. That's going to last you for a long time. But once you fill it with about 30 or 40 5-pound bags of mylar, of rice in mylar, you're going to find out very quickly that you're not Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you're not going to pick it up. You know what I'm saying? You just keep throwing those bags in there every couple of weeks. You go to Walmart and you buy yourself a 5-pound bag of rice, and then you just put it in those mylar bags. And you're just prepping your brains out, and then one day you try to move that tote, it ain't moving. So I literally had to empty it out halfway and carry the other rice in another tote. And I have several totes like that. So you definitely, if you're going to be mobile in any way, shape, or form, you should definitely have some 5-gallon buckets. And, it's like I got into it in the beginning with the old Gamma Seals and all that stuff. Well, I got news to tell you. Gamma Seals are nice. Don't get me wrong. If it's something you use every day, you're going to be in and out of it all the time. Hey, that's great. But guys, take my advice. Do not buy Gamma Seals for long-term storage, because the seals will dry up. The rubber seal on the outside and the rubber seal on the inside ring. They will dry up. I know this. I have several. I've got hundreds of dollars worth of Gamma Seals that I can't use anymore because I opened them to check and crack goes the seals. So yeah, having those buckets, you definitely, I would say you have at least 10% of your stocks in 5 gallon buckets, you
Yeah.
know, and but go with the Mylar, put the Mylar in. You don't have to go and buy 50 pounds of flour. You know what I'm saying? You can buy the small doses of flours, put them in small pieces of Mylar so that when you open them, you don't have that problem with having 50 pounds of flour that you have to use in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. Carla had put in the chat here. Not if you store 1 pound flour vacuum sealed and put them in 5 gallon buckets. So sort of along the same lines of what you were talking about. You don't have to, like I did when I first started out, get the 5 gallon Mylar bags, fill a whole 5 gallon bucket with flour. Get those, portion them into smaller ones, and still use the buckets, because those buckets are one, they're portable, like you were talking about, but they're also armor. So
Yeah.
if you're putting stuff in Mylar bags, that's a great way to store it. The freeze dried stuff, I'm going to start doing some totes as well, but not for the real heavy stuff, because like you said, man, that becomes a pain. That would be a 2-person job. Say we're in a bug out situation. That's a 2-person job loading up the truck.
Yeah, creative redundancy said dollies, and that's great, dude. I mean, but now I'm spending money on dollies. I mean, come on, if you're just going to store something long term and you're never going to move it because it's at your primary location, then hey, great, put it in totes, and never worry about doing anything but dragging it across the floor. But if you've got to get out of town and your plan is to take a buttload of food with you because you don't know where you're going, because people rarely have a real bug out location, you know.
Mhm.
So they're going to want to take as much food as they can. Then you've got to stay mobile. Those buckets are going to save your life.
Yeah, yeah,
And then you
absolutely.
can buy the real expensive containers, like $30-$40 for this one container, and that's stackable, and it's just not going to do as good a job for the money.
Yeah, yeah. And then one thing on the gamma lids you were talking about, which I absolutely 100% agree with. I have like 3 gamma lids. And what those are for is when I open up that flour, when I open up the rice or something like that, that gamma lid is on that package that I'm going to use. So
Yeah.
all I do is that the lid stays on there, because I'll tell you what, once you put a gamma lid on top of that bucket, that sucker's on there.
Yeah, it's on
It's
there.
a pain in the butt to get off. So I use it for that shorter term storage after I crack the seal, basically.
Yeah.
And then I take from that bucket and I fill up a smaller one that goes into the pantry. So it's sort of a 3-stage thing, but
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. Yeah, but like I said, for long term, not a good idea.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is those types of things, I suppose, that you learn throughout your preparedness journey. Things that work. Canned foods is another thing. One of the big things that I think a lot of people, it's another one of those things that people think that, hey, this is a prepper thing. You got to just have shelves and shelves of canned food, and every nook and cranny of your house has got to be packed with some sort of canned food. Lisa and I went through that. Luckily, I mean, not quite that bad. We went through that, and it gets to the point 3-4 years later that you're pulling stuff out from the very back of the cabinet that maybe you could probably open and eat if it were an SHTF situation, but not a chance in hell I was going to do it right now when I can just drive to the grocery store. So it's that stuff that gets thrown away. So you really learn, and I think food storage is one of those big things. You really learn how to do those different things, what worked, what didn't work, and all of that stuff. Sort of the same with bug out bags, right? You start out with I mean, that's constantly changing.
I probably got 10, 12 packs on the other side of this camera, just sitting on the ground.
Yeah. Brandon said here, the other Brandon is he was the one in the video, the other Brandon. You're going to be hard pressed to get a year's supply of food to bug out with and get any other supplies in a single load. Years worth of food.
That's a lot of damn
I
food,
think if
guys.
you're in a bug out situation, I don't know that you're going. I wouldn't be trying to take a year's worth of food. If you're in a bug out situation, you're abandoning a lot.
Yes.
So I forgot what I was going to talk to you about the whole bug out bag thing, because you're pretty big on that. You've got a few, I'll just put it that way, a few different types of bags, and you've changed different things over time. And I think it's pretty interesting that you talk about how the dollar store thing isn't necessarily a no-go, but it's kind of hard to kind of, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what the hell I'm trying to say here. But you've got, I guess, tested different things, done different things through your, even probably before you were on YouTube. But how has like your first bug out bag setup? Do you remember sort of how that was, or did your military experience play into that as well? So you already had some kind of insights on that.
Well, actually, the answer is a little bit of both. My very first bug out bag, it was the typical, pack light, freeze at night mentality. It was super low profile, super lightweight. It probably weighed 15 pounds tops, and it had just the minimalist survival stuff that you'd find in any one of the guys who like to make fire with sparks type ideas. It evolved into, this is stupid, because in my original bug out plan, because I was living between Virginia and North Carolina, and the walking from one place to the next was actually part of the plan, and it was going to take me 3 weeks to get where I needed to go. So, that balance between being as lightweight as possible, but yet having the things that were going to keep me from getting sick, and the ability to actually hunt. It kind of it turned into a hybrid between a bug out bag and what do they call those? Never coming home bags.
Inch bag, yeah.
An inch bag. There you go. So yeah, it goes back and forth. I have to change my whole philosophy now because of where I've recently moved to. It just, the whole bug out bag is going to change from basically like a long range, like hiking / camping, backpacking mentality to more of a lightweight mentality, because there's a different bug out location now. So, but yeah, it does evolve, and it should evolve. You're supposed to do that every 6 months with your bug out bags, because that way you're going through, you're getting the food, and you're swapping the food out. Anything that could go bad or rancid or attract an animal, that or rodent, you need to get out of there and swap out. Just things like that, making sure that it's all, making that 6 month assessment on your bag is actually kind of important if you're into bug out bags.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Kenzie asked here. He said, "Survivalist prepper and local prepper, what do you think about bucket caches in different locations?" And I've got a PVC cache over here that I'm actually going to rebury, but I had a whole bunch of stuff in that. PVC is a lot thicker than a bucket, though. But sealed properly, I don't know. I mean, it's airtight, but I don't know how a bucket. It sounds like a good idea, but I don't know how it would do. Say that the ground saturated or something like that. I assume that it would do okay, but I don't know about 10, 15 years. I think the bucket would probably break down. What are your thoughts? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah. I've seen that. Well, it's not going to stay there long. So you're basically creating work for yourself if you want to go down that road. But what it is you need to check them at least once a year. You need to pull them up. You need to inspect them. Like I said, some foods will go bad, and the canned goods are probably going to be fine, but you are going to have a moisture issue. A lot of times people don't think about it, but the standard 5-gallon bucket with the watertight lid that would normally come with it isn't as watertight as most people think. A lot of times you have to buy the ones that actually have seals on them, that very similar to how they would pack paint in a 5-gallon bucket. There's actually a rubber seal. You may have to change those seals out. You may have to replace the lids. And a lot of times they still leak. One of the things that I actually saw people do is do the 5-gallon buckets with a standard waterproof lid, and then put a contractor's bag, wrap it up in a contractor's bag, and then tape it closed, and then bury it. And then make sure that when you do bury it, that you basically create a flap over the top, so that if water does come down, it'll shed over the top of it into the ground. You also might want to contemplate getting yourself a bag of gravel and digging that hole, and then filling the bottom of that hole with gravel before you put your bucket inside of it, because that will create natural drainage. Any water that comes down will go past it all, will sheet past it all and then go into that gravel and then into the ground.